The Elders' law is clear: no alien may interact with humans. It's an ancient law, etched into the very fabric of this civilization. The Elders, the governing body of this advanced alien world, enforce it with an iron fist. Their fear runs deep, rooted in a time long past, when humanity's ancestors threatened the galaxy with their reckless defiance. The Elders claim the law ensures peace, that humanity must remain isolated, as their presence disrupts the fragile balance of intergalactic order. Every race understands it, and every species respects it, except for the few who dare to question the wisdom of such a restrictive rule. In this world, the warrior caste is a symbol of strength and obedience. They are the protectors, the enforcers, the unquestioning soldiers of the Elders. But there is one among them, a young warrior, who has begun to wonder about the law, to doubt the reasons behind its unbending enforcement. She is loyal, yes, but not blind. The teachings of her people have always stressed that all life must be valued, that each being deserves respect and understanding. But there is no respect for humanity, only fear. The human, a young man, arrives uninvited, a wreckage of a ship falling from the stars, carrying a dying soul in its mangled form. His ship had malfunctioned, crashing onto their world. The warrior finds him, bloodied and barely breathing, and for a moment, everything she's been taught collides with her instincts. His frailty calls to something deeper inside her. The Elders' decree rings in her mind, but the sound of his labored breath is louder. She chooses to disobey. She hides him, tending to his wounds in secret, feeling the weight of every action that strays from the path of obedience. But she cannot bring herself to abandon him. He is a stranger, yet somehow not. As the human regains his strength, their conversations grow. He tells her about his people, their resilience, their history, their constant fight against tyranny. The warrior is drawn to his stories. Humanity, she learns, is not defined by violence, but by an inherent desire for freedom, for autonomy. The Elders' fear of humans was never rooted in their capacity for destruction but in their potential to inspire rebellion, to challenge the status quo. The human stories open her eyes to a truth she's never considered, that humanity's true strength lies in their defiance. This is what terrifies the Elders most. She sees it now, the cause of their fear, and begins to question her allegiance. Days pass, and the weight of her actions settles in. The Elders' spies are ever watchful, and her absence from her duties does not go unnoticed. She's careful, but she knows that the moment her secret is discovered, her life will change forever. Yet she cannot stop. She cannot leave him to die alone, not when he's proven to her that humanity's existence is not a threat, but a promise of something different, a different kind of strength. But the discovery comes, as it always does. The Elders know of her betrayal. Their wrath is swift and unforgiving. She stands before them, accused of defying the law. Her punishment is exile, a fate worse than death for someone who has been bred to serve and protect. The Elders make an example of her, casting her out into the vast unknown, hoping to break her spirit and send a message to any who might think to follow her example. The human does not leave her. Even in his weakened state, he refuses to abandon her, declaring that he owes her his life. Together, they escape. The galaxy they once knew, the society that had raised them both, now lies in ruins behind them. Their journey ahead is uncertain, but it is one they walk together, united in defiance of the law that sought to keep them apart. The Elders, furious at their escape, send their forces to hunt them down, but they know this is no longer about the law. It is about something much greater, a rebellion in its infancy, a spark ignited by one human and one warrior who dared to defy. The journey is perilous. They are not alone in their defiance. As they travel, they encounter others, aliens who, like the warrior, have grown disillusioned with the Elders' rule, who believe in freedom, in the right to choose their own path. These outcasts, these rebels, join their cause, swelling their ranks. Each step they take away from the Elders' world is a step closer to something larger. They begin to understand the power of their resistance. The human, with his unwavering belief in freedom, inspires them all. His voice becomes a rallying cry, and together, they prepare to challenge the system that has kept them all in chains. The elders, realizing too late the true nature of the threat they face, scramble to maintain control. They send their elite forces to hunt the fugitives down, but the seed of rebellion has already taken root. The humans' defiance, combined with the warriors' courage, has sparked a movement. The elders are no longer in control. The galaxy begins to shift, and the warriors of the old order find themselves facing the very thing they feared, their own downfall. What began as a simple act of defiance has evolved into a revolution that promises to reshape the entire galaxy. The warrior and the human, no longer bound by the laws that once controlled them, look ahead. The future is uncertain, but their resolve is clear. Together, they will continue to fight. And as the stars watch, their rebellion begins to spread. The young warrior's decision to defy the elders' law was not made lightly. The gravity of what she was about to do weighed heavily on her. Every part of her had been raised to uphold the law, to defend it with her very life. She had always believed that the law was necessary, that it protected their people, that it kept the galaxy safe. But when she found the human, broken and bleeding on their world, everything she had ever known was questioned. His life, fragile and desperate, demanded something beyond obedience to a cold, ancient law. She hid him, defied the elders, and in the quiet of secret meetings, nursed him back to health. The human's wounds were severe, but not fatal, and over the days, she watched him slowly recover. His condition improved, and with every moment that passed, her internal conflict grew. She could feel the heat of the elders' gaze upon her, watching, waiting for her to slip, but she refused to stop. There was something about this human that called to her, something raw and untamed, like the wild energy of a galaxy full of unknown possibilities. It fascinated her. Their conversations were brief at first. She didn't have the luxury of time, and he was too weak to talk for long, but with each word they exchanged, something inside her shifted. She had expected fear. She had expected anger. But instead, what she found in his eyes was something else entirely, hope. The human spoke of his world, of the wars, the chaos, but also of the human spirit. He spoke of freedom, of the ability to choose, of a history full of defiance against oppression. Humanity's true strength was not in their ability to destroy, but in their capacity to rise up against tyranny, to never accept their chains, no matter how strong or invisible they were. This resonated with her in a way she could not have anticipated. The more she listened, the more she understood. The elders' fear had nothing to do with violence. It was the fear of what humanity could inspire, a drive for freedom that could spread like wildfire. The human spoke of revolutions, of societies overthrowing their oppressors, and she realized that was exactly what the elders were terrified of. Humans could ignite something in others that no amount of control could contain. The law they had established, the rule of isolation, wasn't a protective measure, it was a containment strategy. And it was working, until now. The human had planted the seeds of rebellion in her mind, and with them, her perception of everything she'd ever believed was shattered. But her defiance came with consequences. The longer the human stayed, the greater the risk. Her comrades in the warrior caste began to grow suspicious. They were trained to notice shifts in behavior, to recognize when something was amiss. Soon, she could feel their eyes on her, sensing the tension, the growing unease. She had to be careful. The elders' enforcers were everywhere, and they would not hesitate to punish her for her disobedience. Yet, despite the looming danger, she couldn't stop. She was no longer bound by their rules. As the human strength returned, so did the bond between them. They shared more than just words, they shared understanding. The warrior's initial hesitation gave way to an unspoken trust. He had taught her something she didn't even know she was looking for. Through their conversations, she began to question the very foundation of her society. Why should anyone's will be subjugated by another's fear? She had been raised to obey without question, to believe that the elders' rule was absolute, but now, as she looked into the eyes of the human, she began to see the cracks in their system. But everything changed when the elders' spies found her. Her betrayal was exposed, and the penalty for such an offense was severe. The elders did not tolerate disobedience, especially not when it came to the law that had protected them for centuries. She was dragged before them, accused of breaking the law, of endangering the entire galaxy by aiding a human. The elders' anger was palpable, their voices cold and unforgiving. Her fate had been sealed the moment she made the choice to help him. There was no turning back. The warrior stood before them, proud yet broken. She had acted out of compassion, out of a belief that something deeper than law could guide her. But now, she faced their wrath. They sentenced her to exile, stripped of her rank and cast out into the harsh wilderness of their world. She would be an example, a reminder to all who might consider defying the elders. She would be alone, abandoned by everything she had ever known, left to die in the unforgiving lands beyond their civilization's reach. The human, however, would not let her suffer alone. Despite the pain he had endured, despite the danger of being discovered, he refused to leave her. He owed her his life, and he would not allow her to face the consequences of her actions without him. Together, they made their escape. The odds were against them, the elders' forces already mobilizing, but their resolve was unshakable. As they fled, they knew the galaxy would never be the same. They were no longer bound by the law, no longer restricted by the elders' control. They escaped, but this was only the beginning. As the warrior and the human moved deeper into the unknown, they found others, aliens who had grown tired of the elders' rule, who shared their desire for freedom. These rebels, these outcasts, recognized the potential for change. The humans' words rang true to them. The warrior's courage inspired them. They, too, were tired of the law that stifled their growth, and they, too, sought something more. With each new ally, their rebellion grew stronger. In the distance, the elders began to realize the magnitude of the threat they faced. What had started as a small, personal act of defiance had become a symbol of something much larger. The rebellion was growing, and it was gaining momentum. The elders could not stop it with their laws. They could not control the fire that had been lit. The human and the warrior had sparked a revolution, and the galaxy was about to change forever. The path ahead was unclear. But one thing was certain, humanity's defiance had ignited a movement, one that would never be extinguished. Together, the warrior and the human would lead the charge, and their rebellion would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The discovery came swiftly, like the bite of an inevitable storm. The elders, those ancient beings who ruled with an iron grip, were not fools. Their spies were everywhere, watching, listening, waiting for even the smallest sign of disobedience. The young warrior knew the consequences of her actions, but the human had taught her something that had changed her forever. She could no longer be the person who obeyed blindly, who followed the law without question. She had chosen to help him, and now, the price of that choice was being paid. Her betrayal of the elders' law was exposed in a crushing wave of authority. The elders were swift in their judgment. They wasted no time with pleas or explanations. The penalty for such an offense was exile, a punishment reserved for those who dared defy their absolute rule. The warrior was arrested, dragged before the elders in their grand hall, where they spoke in cold, commanding tones. The law was absolute. There was no room for negotiation. The punishment had been decided the moment she had hidden the human from their gaze. They spoke of the law's importance, of its necessity to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. They reminded her of the power they held and the peace they had ensured for centuries. They accused her of threatening the balance, of endangering everything the elders had worked to preserve. They were unmoving, cold, and unyielding in their judgment. Exile would be her fate. There was no mercy for those who betrayed them. The warrior stood silent as the elders sentenced her to exile. The words stung, but they also freed her. She had expected the punishment, but she had not anticipated the clarity it would bring. She was no longer shackled by the expectations of her people. The law that had once defined her life now seemed hollow and oppressive. She had broken it not out of malice but out of compassion. The human had shown her a path, one that led away from the control of the elders and towards something far greater, freedom. But the human would not let her face her fate alone. Despite his injuries, despite the fact that he was still recovering from the trauma of his crash, he refused to leave her side. She had saved him, and now he would save her. There was no question in his mind. He would not allow the elders to carry out their sentence, to condemn her to a life of isolation and despair. Together, they would escape. Together, they would defy the law one final time. The escape was not easy. The elders' enforcers were everywhere, watching their every move. The warrior had trained for years to fight, but this was not a battle of strength. This was a race against time, a struggle to outwit and outmaneuver the oppressive force that sought to keep them in their place. The human's knowledge of stealth and survival tactics, honed in the chaos of his own world, became their greatest asset. He guided her through the shadows, teaching her how to move with silent precision, how to avoid detection. As they slipped through the alien city, the warrior's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the eyes of the elders upon her, even though she could not see them. She could hear the whispers of the law in the back of her mind, but she pushed them aside. There was no turning back now. She was no longer a warrior bound by duty, she was a woman bound by something far more powerful, her own belief in freedom, in the right to live without oppression. They reached the outskirts of the city, where the enforcer's reach was weaker, and the human's eyes shone with determination. He had seen much of the galaxy, and his experiences had shaped him into someone who could not be easily broken. He had no intention of letting the elders win. The warrior, too, had found something within herself, something she hadn't known was there until the human had awakened it. They were both rebels now, not just against the elders, but against a system that had kept them both in chains. Their escape was not a quiet affair. The elders had already begun to realize that the warrior was gone, and their forces were closing in. As they moved through the dense forest outside the city, the sounds of pursuit reached their ears. The warriors of the elders were relentless, but the human and the warrior were determined. They fought with a fury born of necessity, not anger. The warrior's skills were unmatched in combat, and the human's adaptability made them a formidable team. They moved as one, a seamless blend of human resilience and alien agility. But it wasn't just the physical escape that mattered. It was what came next. The moment they were free, the warrior knew they could never return to the life they had known. The elders would never forgive them. Their rebellion would not go unnoticed. The galaxy would change, and so would they. The warrior's heart swelled with a mix of fear and excitement. She had never felt more alive, more certain of her purpose. The human spoke of freedom, of the possibilities that lay beyond the elders' reach. He spoke of rebellion, not just against the elders, but against all who sought to control others. His words resonated deeply with her. The elders had built their civilization on the backs of those who obeyed without question. The warrior had been one of them, a loyal servant to a law that no longer made sense. Now, she was free, and she would fight for others to be free too. As they journeyed deeper into the unknown, they found others, aliens who had also grown tired of the elders' oppressive rule, who had long since realized that freedom was worth fighting for. The human's presence became a rallying cry, a symbol of the change that was coming. His stories of rebellion, of freedom, were not just words to these outcasts. They were a promise. Together, they began to form a rebellion, an army not of soldiers, but of those who refused to be controlled. The elders, realizing the enormity of the threat they now faced, scrambled to maintain control. They sent their best warriors to hunt down the fugitives, but the rebellion had already begun. The human and the warrior had set something in motion that no amount of power could stop. The galaxy was on the brink of a revolution, and the elders' reign was beginning to unravel. As the human and the warrior looked ahead, they knew they had only just begun. Their fight would not be easy, but it would be worth it. The rebellion they had sparked would grow, and together, they would lead it. There would be no more fear, no more oppression. The galaxy would be theirs to shape. And they would not rest until they had set it free. The escape was a catalyst, but it was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The warrior and the human, now bound by shared purpose, faced a future that was both uncertain and brimming with possibility. Their journey was not just about fleeing, It was about starting something new, something that would challenge the foundations of everything the elders had built. The galaxy had been held in a stranglehold for centuries, its populations controlled and manipulated by a ruling elite that had made it clear disobedience would not be tolerated. But that was before the human and the warrior came together. The rebellion had sparked from a single, defiant act, but now it was spreading like wildfire. They were not alone. Across the galaxy, whispers began to circulate, whispers of freedom, of change, of the possibility of a life beyond the rule of the elders. These whispers grew into something louder, more powerful, and with each passing day, more beings joined their cause. The human's words, once dismissed by the elders as the ramblings of a rebellious outsider, had found fertile ground. He spoke of autonomy, of breaking free from chains, of living without fear of oppression. These were not just ideas to him, they were principles he had lived by. He had seen what tyranny could do, and he had fought it on his own world. Now, he was offering others a chance to do the same. The warrior, who had once been a servant of the elders, now found herself at the heart of a movement she had never imagined. She was no longer just an observer, she was a leader. She had learned what it meant to fight for something larger than herself, to stand up for those who had been silenced for too long. They found allies in places they had never expected. Alien species who had once bowed to the elders, who had been subjugated by the system for generations, now saw a way out. They rallied to the human's call, drawn to his vision of a galaxy free from the constraints of tyranny. Some had once been too afraid to act, too complacent in their obedience, but the human had shown them that fear could be overcome. The warrior had demonstrated that strength could be used for something greater than maintaining the status quo. The rebellion began to take shape, and soon, it was more than just a group of outcasts on the run. It was a force that could no longer be ignored. The elders, in their arrogance, had believed that their rule was unshakable. They had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated the power of a single act of defiance. Now, they were scrambling to regain control, sending their best forces to track down the insurgents and crush the rebellion before it could grow any stronger. But it was already too late. The rebellion had spread too far, and the momentum was unstoppable. The human's influence continued to grow. His message resonated with those who had lived under the elders' oppressive regime, those who had been conditioned to believe that they had no other choice but to obey. The warrior had become a symbol of hope, a beacon for all who sought liberation. Together, they led their growing army forward, pushing back against the elders' forces and forcing the galaxy to reconsider everything it had known. There were moments of intense struggle, moments when the odds seemed insurmountable. The elders were not easily defeated. Their forces were vast and well-trained. But the rebellion was no longer just about fighting for survival, it was about fighting for freedom. The human, with his unwavering belief in the cause, inspired those around him. The warrior, with her strength and experience, kept the group focused. Together, they forged ahead, determined to dismantle the old order and replace it with something new. The galaxy watched as the elders' power began to erode. The systems they had so carefully built, the control they had so meticulously maintained, began to unravel. The more they tried to suppress the rebellion, the stronger it grew. The elders had created their own downfall by underestimating humanity's capacity for defiance, for rebellion, for hope. They had believed that their laws would keep them in control, that their authority would remain unchallenged, but they had forgotten one crucial thing: humanity was not a people to be controlled. It was a force to be reckoned with. In the face of overwhelming odds, the rebellion reached its tipping point. The warrior and the human knew that they had reached the final stage of their journey. The elders had one last chance to crush them, to stop the rebellion before it could completely topple their reign. But they had already lost. The heart of the rebellion had been ignited, and it could no longer be extinguished. The people had risen. The chains had been broken. The final battle was fierce, but it was clear that the tide had turned. The elders' forces, once formidable and relentless, were now scattered and weakened. The warriors who had once served the elders now stood beside the rebels, their loyalty to their people stronger than their allegiance to a failed regime. The human and the warrior stood at the forefront of the charge, their presence a symbol of everything that had been achieved and everything that was yet to come. The moment the elders' power crumbled was not just a victory for the rebellion, it was a victory for every oppressed being in the galaxy. The old ways had been destroyed, and a new era was dawning. The human and the warrior, who had once been outcasts, were now leaders in a galaxy that had been forever changed by their defiance. They had sparked a revolution, and that revolution had succeeded. The galaxy was no longer the elders' domain. It was the people's domain. And as the dust settled and the galaxy took its first steps toward freedom, the warrior and the human stood side by side, knowing that the fight was not over. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But they had won something far more important than any battle. They had won the right to choose their own path. And they would never stop fighting for that freedom, for themselves, and for every being who had ever been silenced by the will of the elders. Together, they had changed the galaxy.